Oh, okay. I think we're good to go. Bismillah. Yeah, I'm getting an error message also. So I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, we'll continue. We can still record it. All right. So maybe the Twitter part of it won't work, but we can record it. That's the good part. All right. So welcome to DevLIVE. Here, I'm your host Javed Mohammed at Open World 2017. I have as my guest today Chris Richardson. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you
for coming. I think the last time we met was in Beijing.
It was
a few months back. And how you been?
Good. Good. Just I think I must have been back to China at least once since I seen you.
Yes. Seems like you got frequent flyers just going there. I think it's
yes, I have quite a few miles saved up right now. But you know, a lot of demand for microservices, you know, and knowledge around the world. So it's keeping me busy.
So you gave a major keynote over here about microservice and transaction. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, so my talk today was about kind of a really interesting aspect to the microservice architecture, namely how do you do transaction management.
Okay.
You know, so if you think about it, like sort of transactions are kind of like the underpinning of enterprise applications, right? You know, essentially an enterprise application is code plus database, and you know, it's absolutely essential that you have transaction management in place. But what's particularly challenging about the microservice architecture is that each service is its own island of data. You know, conceptually it has its own database. That's not necessarily its own database server, but its own private data. And so, you know, in theory, you could use distributed transactions, but that sort of technology is really not an option for modern applications. And so you end up using an alternative approach, which is known as a saga.
A saga?
Saga.
Saga. Okay.
S-A-G-A.
Okay.
You know the Norse tales, right, or whatever they,
all right,
whatever they were. And the idea is, so instead of, you know, two-phase commit, what you're using is this saga, and a saga is a sequence of local transactions.
Okay.
So you basically break up this big transaction into a sequence of smaller ones. Each one executes within a service, and then they're actually chained together through messaging or events.
So isn't that, so when you got so many of these, I think we had that conversation back in Beijing, but so I guess in some cases it makes sense to have an application that is more monolithic, and in other cases it you know, it makes sense to go to a microservice architecture. But when you go to something that's distributed, doesn't that, when you're talking about data, does that cause issues of coherency?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so like the example I used in the talk is you had a customer service that managed customers and an order service that managed orders. And then when you wanted to place an order, you had to verify that the customer had sufficient credit. So you can think of that as needing a transaction that spans multiple services. And to solve that problem, you would use a saga where there was a transaction in the order service, a transaction in the customer service, and then another transaction back in the order service.
Okay. So where do you see us in the grand vision of microservices? You know, there's always the vision, there's where we're at today. Kind of where do you, you know, in terms of a new concept or a new, I don't know, shouldn't use the word technology, but a new process. Where do you see us in terms of an adoption of microservices in terms of the bigger scheme of things?
Oh, Yeah, I think there's tremendous interest in microservices. You know, I think it's obviously it originated inside sort of the consumer or the large-scale internet companies. And you know, if you take a step back and ask, well, why did companies like Amazon embrace the microservice architecture? It actually wasn't anything to do with scale, but it was the fact that they were sort of in this hyper-competitive market, and their software developers needed to deliver features very rapidly, and they could not do that with the monolithic architecture, and so they adopted what would now be called a microservice architecture. So, and that started, I think, in the kind of on the web, but now businesses are in the same sort of more traditional businesses are in the same situation where, you know, they need to innovate faster, which means the developers need to develop faster, basically build better software faster. And the microservice architecture is one of the key ways in which you're having to do that. So I think large enterprises are just taking a serious look at the microservice architecture as a way to accelerate software development.
Okay. So when you're talking distributed, the buzzword that keeps going off in my hand is, you know, so in fact, yesterday one of the interviews I did was around blockchain, because that, again, kind of has this whole distributed architecture. Does that kind of tie in at all with microservices, or is that
you know, that to me is that's off in sort of application land.
Okay.
And I know that blockchain is actually, you know, it was funny. I was doing a podcast yesterday as well, and then one of the jokes was you needed to combine machine learning with blockchain and microservices.
Okay.
Because that would be like a, you know, triple hype.
It sounds like Nirvana.
Yes. Yes. Funding idea. So yeah, I don't see blockchain as being a kind of fundamental technology in a microservice architecture. Okay. It's much more of a higher level application sort of domain specific technology. If it actually ever proves to be widely useful.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you know, to me, one of the issues I have with blockchain, you know, it's just this whole issue that it's computationally expensive. Although I did learn that that's primarily private blockchain as opposed to public blockchain yesterday. But it's sort of like, you know, when we're trying to move to kind of like highly efficient, high volume computing, you really want to base it on some technology that is like incredibly computationally expensive. Doesn't make sense to me.
All right. Okay. All right. So it's changing channels. We have a common love for tennis. What's happening in the tennis world?
Oh, what has been happening in the tennis world? I mean, you know, I just think the tennis this year has been so exciting. Basically, because the quote old guys have staged an amazing comeback, right? Does
that mean there's hope for us?
Yeah. It inspires me. It inspires me. But yeah, you know, it started off with that fantastic win by Roger Federer in Australia.
In Australia?
And then, you know, with Nadal playing well, and it's just awesome.
All right. Okay. So, and you were mentioning you're going to be attending the Australian Open in 2018.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's like I wasn't going to go, but then I got the email saying tickets were on sale, and I just couldn't
resist.
I could not say no.
All right. Well, perhaps we can do another DevLIVE session at the Australian Open.
You know, that would be a brilliant thing. Yeah, combine my two of my favorite things into one.
Okay, I'll ask my boss about it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Chris, as always, real pleasure meeting you. Thanks for coming down and sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.